Alright guys, my name is Philip, and today I want to talk about why we shouldn't illegalize bad things. Now, in this video, I'd like to particularly talk about three things, alright? Guns, drugs, and prostitution. Now, these all are three things that I think pretty much everyone can agree are pretty bad. Well, it depends on how you look at it, but they're all bad in certain ways, certainly. So, why should they be legal, in my opinion? Alright, let's start with guns. So, guns are illegal to prevent murder, right? Guns are illegal because guns, well, it's a really efficient weapon. It's so efficient, in fact, that it's scary how efficient it is. All you have to do is pull the trigger and someone's dead. That's why it's illegal. Now, the thing is, guns don't disappear when they're made illegal. The only thing that really happens when you legalize guns, in short terms, is good guys get their guns taken away, but the bad guys, they still have the guns because they don't care about the law. So, gun control takes the guns away from good guys so they can't protect themselves against the bad guys. Now, a prime example of this is something that happened here in Norway just 5 years ago, 22nd of July 2011. It was a guy, a terrorist named Anders Behring Breivik. He was killing about 80 innocent teenagers on an island. It was a sort of political camp with young politicians. So these were all about 16 years old, never done anything bad in their lives, completely innocent young people, alright? And he killed about 80 of them with his big assault rifle. I believe it was a M4 or something. So not only was it a gun, it wasn't like a pistol, it was a big fat one. And so he didn't really just gattle them down. He shot them down one by one, slowly, and he walked around in his intimidating way and just let the fear and terror around him sink in, and he loved it. He enjoyed it because it was completely psycho in his head. He walked around and he just enjoyed the fear of these young innocent people. And it took about 45 minutes or something, a really long time, alright, before the police came. I believe it was a half an hour actually. 45 minutes is an exaggeration. I believe it was half an hour before the police came and arrested him. Right. Now, if someone had a gun on that island, he would have been dead. Straight away. If someone had a gun on that island, he wouldn't probably not even have the balls to do the attack. So this is a very good example of what I just said. Good guys with guns don't just kill people. They don't just kill innocent people. Good guys with guns protect themselves with guns from bad guys with guns. When these good guys are not able to protect themselves against bad guys with guns, bad guys can shoot good guys one by one without consequence. Because police officers cannot just teleport, okay? We can't just rely on the police. It's just a stupid thing. And that's initially what happened straight away after the terrorist attacks. It was so silly, okay? Everyone was blaming the police. Everyone was just, oh, the police here in Norway is so inefficient. That's why so many people died. No, The reason why so many people died is because of the stupid gun control that doesn't let good people protect themselves against bad people. So, as a prime example of that, but then, you know, if you're pro-gun control, you might bring up the argument of school shootings and how school shootings have been plummeting in Australia after they got gun control. Well, I saw that coming, and all of those happened in gun-free zones. The schools, both in the US and Australia, were gun-free zones. And they weren't even gun-free zones with maximum security that you have to breach through with, with metal detectors and such. They were just gun-free hippie zones. For Christ's sake, it would be so easy to get in there with a assault rifle and just kill whoever you wanted without having any consequence, alright? So, if just a teacher just had a gun in her drawer or something, right, it wouldn't have been so bad. And frankly, like, it would probably not even have happened. The terrorists wouldn't even have had the balls to do it. Probably. Because they would know that, okay, there's guns here, right? There are people here that are capable of protecting themselves. I shouldn't do this. I'll die. Right? And well, in the case of school shootings, most of them kill themselves afterwards. But that's, to bring another example up, again, the terrorist attacks in Paris that just happened can't remember quite exactly when it was now, but it's still quite recent. That happened with guns and not bombs. There were several attacks. There were some with bombs, some with guns. But there was one attack in a restaurant in Paris where the terrorist had a gun, a big machine gun. And if someone at that restaurant had a gun, alright, the terrorist would have died before he managed to kill as many as he managed to kill. Or even, if everyone in that restaurant potentially had a gun, and the terrorist was aware that every single person in this restaurant is a potential gun owner, he would probably not even have the balls to do it. That's why good guys should have guns. And the fact that, gun control does not take guns away from bad people, that's a fact. And that's been proven again and again and again. And if you don't see that, you're blind. So that's just given, okay? Bad guys still have guns when guns are illegal. If you're really committed to killing someone, you'll find a way of getting a gun. Alright. So that's guns. Let's move over to drugs, okay? And this is a really interesting one. Probably the most interesting if you ask me, because the way I see it, there aren't only bad drugs. Alright? I'm talking specifically about psychedelics. They're not necessarily bad. They could be bad, alright? And making them illegal makes them more likely to be bad. And I'll explain what I mean by that, okay? So, now that psychedelics are illegal, well, first of all, people are getting fake psychedelics on the black market that are much more dangerous than real psychedelics. And if they're getting this shit, right, and one of their friends dies or something, right, worst case scenario, one of their friends die from this fake acid, they can't report that to the police, right, because they're gonna go to prison because they were trying to buy acid. So that's one thing. And another thing is also that by illegalizing it, you are killing the educational aspect around it, okay? So that's a bit like in the old Christian days, where we didn't have sexual education because sex was just bad to talk about. So, you know, teenagers would end up getting STDs and getting pregnant without knowing why. And nobody dared talk about it because it was taboo, right? It was taboo. No one talked about sex. And it's the same thing with psychedelics now. The fact that it's so taboo, even if you mention acid in a normal conversation, people are just like, whoa, you just went there. LSD? Seriously? You do that shit? And I'm like, no, I don't do it. I'm just saying, like, I'm just bringing it up, right? Even if you just say magic mushrooms or LSD in a normal conversation, people are just like, whoa! Okay? It's super taboo. It really is. So what's happening then is you end up with people, you know, like fucking 15-year-olds recreationally doing acid because they're like, oh yeah, I got this acid from, you know, a friend of my brother, and it's like super cool. Apparently you start seeing rainbows and shit. Yeah, it's really cool. And they know nothing about it. They don't know that you should lock the door to the balcony when you take psychedelics. They don't know that you shouldn't take psychedelics with people you don't trust. They don't know that you shouldn't look yourself in the mirror under the influence of psychedelics. They don't know that you should not lock yourself in the toilet under the influence of psychedelics. They don't know that psychedelics, a psychedelic trip lasts for 10 to 12 hours. So if you start really, really bad tripping and you get lost in a negative state of mind, you're kind of fucked. They don't know any of this, alright? And they take it, and they're like 15 years old, so they have no sense of responsibility, and they're putting themselves in really dangerous situations. And the really ironic thing is, I saw a documentary about this quite recently, about LSD. And the reason why LSD got illegal was because some people killed people under the influence of LSD, and quite a lot of people actually killed themselves under the influence of LSD. Now, the way that's ironic is that by illegalizing it, you're making that sort of thing more likely to happen. Because of this educational thing that I just talked about. People are not educated about it. People just take it, and they expect some sort of rainbow wonderland with unicorns and pink elephants. And it's just, it's not what it is, okay? It's a very, very powerful drug. And so is, you know, magic mushrooms, so is salvia divinorum, so is DMT, so is mescaline. They're all powerful drugs, and you shouldn't fuck around with them. You shouldn't take them recreationally just because it's illegal and hardcore and cool. So, you know, therefore it should be illegal, right? Because then people stop doing it. No, absolutely not. Drugs don't disappear by making them illegal. So now I've covered psychedelics. The reason why I took that in particular was because it is a very interesting kind, like a category of drug, right? It's not really anything quite like any other drug, because it has benefits. It has effects, okay, that lasts on for your whole lifetime. It's not only temporary. I feel like most other drugs are just temporary. Or if it has an impact on your whole life, future, it's almost always necessarily negative. Psychedelics could also have a negative impact on your life, but it could also have a positive one. I don't see that in any other drugs. It's all negative. It's all lung cancer. It's all, what do you call that when you get from alcohol? Something with your liver or your kidneys. Anyways, it's always like negative, right? So now we covered psychedelics. Let's cover drugs in general, or what I like to call bad drugs. Why should they be legal? Well, for the same reason as everything else I've mentioned, because they don't disappear when you make them illegal. They get more dangerous, really, by making them illegal, and the whole community around it gets more dangerous too. You get, blackmailing starting to happen, people getting killed because they're snitching to the police. It becomes a hostile environment around this whole drug thing. It's very tense and dangerous because it's illegal. People don't want to go to prison, right? People don't want to get busted. And also, the educational aspect, that people don't hear about this drug, so people just take it, People just snort cocaine and they're like, yeah, this is really cool, let's snort some fucking cocaine. And they take too much or something, and bad things could really happen because it's taboo, because people don't talk about it, and people don't even want to talk about it. Not even the people taking it wants to talk about it. They're just like, yeah, have some cocaine, it's really cool, it's illegal and stuff, and it's like hardcore. Well, that's not exactly what they say, but you get the picture. And I also talked to a psychologist. I know he's the son of my grandfather's brother, who was working with heroin addicts. And he said that he had heard from his clients that when they were in prison, they got methadone to get off the heroin. But after they got hooked on the methadone instead of heroin, they didn't really get any help to get off the methadone. In addition to that, it's worth mentioning that methadone is more addicting than heroin. So, in a way, they're not really getting help in prison at all, these heroin addicts. And the really bad thing about putting them in prison too, like drug addicts in general, not only heroin, is that you're only giving them yet another traumatic experience to escape. That's why a lot of them are taking drugs in the first place, whether it's subconscious or if they're doing it purely intentionally. They are escaping a traumatic past. These drugs are their gateway to Wonderland, alright? And by putting them in prison, by isolating them from their families and friends, and isolating them from their jobs, ruining their lives, by putting them in prison, you're just giving them yet another miserable thing to try to overcome. It's so far from morally correct to put drug addicts in prison that it's disgusting to even think that we're still doing it. And the most shocking thing about it is most people still are for it. People are just like, yeah, well, drugs should be illegal though because they're bad and addicting. And that's their argument. And it's like, you don't see what's going on? You don't care about these people's lives, or like what? So people really need to start waking up to the fact that the war on drugs is completely immoral and it's just terrible. It's just terrible. And it's also a waste of tax money and a waste of police department's resources. It's just a total waste, and it's immoral. But that's drugs, okay? That's drugs and guns. So now we'll move on over to prostitution, which is probably the one that's gonna offend the most people, especially here in Norway, where about 100% of the whole population is feminists. By saying that I want prostitution to be legal, I'm not at all saying that I'm for a sort of pimp culture where women are just being treated like sex slaves and traded around like pieces of meat, and that vagina should be something that you can just buy, you know, at a convenience store. I'm not at all saying that. In fact, the only kind of prostitute I want to exist is the kind that's completely voluntarily selling her own body. I'm strongly against, you know, sex slaves and trading, what do you call that, human trafficking. And forcing people to do things against their will, force-feeding teenage girls with heroin and selling them to customers who don't really care about their lives. I'm strongly against that, okay? The only prostitute I want to exist is the voluntary one. But when you make it illegal, you're putting them all in the same category, okay? You're saying that, you know, the voluntary self-employed prostitute and the abused teenage heroin addict sex slave, it's all the same thing. Well, it's not. And by saying that it is the same thing, that a prostitute is just a prostitute, you're completely trivializing abuse and violence in the prostitute community. You know, just to give a few examples, okay? In the case of the self-employed voluntary one, if she gets raped, who is she gonna tell? You know, if she reports that to the police, she's gonna go in prison because she's a whore. And also, in the case of the prostitute that has a pimp, right, a boss, that's quite abusive and bad. If someone gets caught having sex with her, who's gonna go in prison? The customer, the prostitute, or the pimp? Well, all three are gonna go to prison, the way it is today. But who really deserves to go to prison? Just think about it. The customer doesn't really know what's going on. He doesn't know anything about this prostitute's life. He doesn't know about the violence that's been going on, the bad things that her pimp has been doing to her, and so on. The prostitute doesn't say any of these things to the customer either, because, you know, she's blackmailed. If she says something and the pimp finds out, that she's been telling the truth, she's gonna get hit so hard. She's gonna forget who she is, right? And the prostitute isn't really doing anything wrong either. Not even if it's her choice. Not even if she actually volunteered to, you know, be a sex slave, which is quite unlikely, I'd say. But not even then has she done anything wrong, really. She's just been selling her body and someone's been buying it. The pimp should go to prison. Because the pimp is the one who's forcing the prostitute to do things against her will. The pimp is the one forcing the prostitute to sleep with customers she doesn't necessarily want to sleep with. The pimp is the one who, you know, in many cases, beat up the prostitute. The pimp is the only one that deserves to go to prison. The way it is right now, all of the three are going to prison. What does that really mean, though? That means 3 times as many resources, 3 times as much time, 3 times as much tax money, and 3 times as much prison space is being spent on this. So you're completely slowing down the war on prostitution by illegalizing prostitution. As funny as that is, okay? As ironical as that is. You are just completely ruining the war on prostitution by making it illegal. Because the only one that really deserves to go to prison is the pimp. And by spending so much resources and so much time and so much money into these 2 other people who haven't really done anything wrong, you're making it less likely for the pimp to get caught, actually. So there you have it. Prostitution should not be illegal. And even in the case of, you know, the violent sort of sex slave culture, even then, all the prostitutes would be better off in a country where prostitution was legal. They'd be better off. So to wrap it all up, okay, generally speaking, the reason why bad things shouldn't be legal is because those bad things get worse when you make them illegal. That's all I have for you guys today. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I did change some people's minds with this video. Like this video if it did, or like this video if you agree. Anyways, thanks for watching. Goodbye.